Everybody in this room should never get over the grace of God and the goodness of God. What the choir was singing about, the cross, and what He's done, and how He's forgiven us, saved us, redeemed us, and what we have because of Him. These verses that we're going to look at in just a few minutes are not verses of the great ancestry of the Jewish people. It's the great grace of the Jewish people's God. The greatness about my story or your story is not us. It's Him. My life's a mess sometimes. Here's one thing Joshua said in chapter 23, verse 14. I think it's a cool verse of Scripture. He says, "Behold, this day I am going the way of all the earth." That's just a biblical way of saying I'm getting ready to die. "And ye know in all your hearts and in all your souls," you know this completely, thoroughly, "that not one thing hath failed of all the good things which the Lord your God spake concerning you. All are come to pass unto you. Not one thing hath failed." I failed, you failed, we've all failed. God has never failed. God has been so good to me. When I hear other people's stories, sometimes I almost feel guilty at the life that I had. I talked a little bit about this last night, and we might mention it again in these verses as we go through it. But I didn't pick the home I was born in. I was clueless to how good and blessed I was to have the home I had. I didn't pick that. God just gave me the mom and daddy that I got. They weren't perfect. I think over at Mount Sinai, I think my mom is perfect, but I lived with her. She ain't. But what a heritage. But listen to y'all. My heritage is not a Robert's heritage. My heritage is God's story. My mom and daddy were complete opposites when it comes to how they were raised. My mama was raised by a godly man and woman and in church, and Jesus again was front page news, and my daddy was raised as godless as you possibly could be raised over on Judson Mill in Greenville and then Pelzer. But in the providence of God, and you've heard me probably tell this story, in the providence of God, he had a good friend that lived in Katichi. And he would come over to Katichi and hang out with Harold Nicholson. Harold became a Wesleyan preacher. One of the godliest men I ever knew. He's in heaven now. What a man. The last church was right up the road. I think it's on Shady Grove. Might be Shady Grove Wesleyan, or I can't remember the name. Doesn't matter. What a man. And my dad and my mom met. I have no clue how they got married because my dad was lost. I don't know if he told Papa and Mammy that he was saved or what. I don't know how that happened. I've not got all the details. I've had the conversation, but I've not got all the details on that. But they got married, and Daddy was lost, and they lived over in Greenville for a little while, and Mama was going to church. My mama's 97 years old. She's had a rough 2 weeks with this cyst on the back of her leg. She's talking about ready to die and wants to die and tired of living. Never seen my mom like this. But I guarantee she's in church this morning. She had to drag that bad leg in there. So she was going to church, and she went to this little Methodist church over there, not too far from Judson Mill, and Dad wouldn't go with her. But then he got to feeling bad because she's going to have to walk. They didn't have cars. It's right at the end of World War II, and it's poor, and didn't have a vehicle, and so she had to walk, and Daddy didn't want to walk her by herself. And so he went in this little Methodist church. And first night, the preacher preached on hell. And Daddy, all the way home, with probably some choice words for my mom, I ain't going back to that place. I'm done with that. That's all that man can talk about. Well, he went back the next night because you know my mama, she's going back. Guess what? He preached on hell Tuesday night. He preached on hell Wednesday night. And my daddy got saved. Your story, my story, all our stories are grace stories. I'm nothing. I'm nothing. God's everything. God's amazing. God's wonderful. God's faithful. God's true. God's righteous. God's holy. God redeems. God forgives. God saves. God delivers. God gives peace. God gives comfort. God gives sleep. God gives answers. God gives healing. You just throw anything at the end of God, and it is.